The ayes are 54, the nays are 40. The motion to reconsider is passed. Under the previous order, the clerk will report the motion to invoke cloture.
Cloture motion. We, the undersigned senators, in accordance with the provisions of Rule 22.
The majority leader is
rules.
recognized.
This will be the last vote. The next vote will be Monday at 5:30.
Senate will come to order.
This will be the last.
Senate will come to order. The majority leader is
This will
recognized.
be the last vote today. The next vote will be Monday at 5:30.
By unanimous consent, the mandatory quorum call has been waived. The question is it the sense of the Senate that debate on the nomination of Robert Leon Wilkins of the District of Columbia to be United States Circuit Judge for the District of Columbia Circuit shall be brought to a close upon reconsideration? The yeas and nays are mandatory. Under the rule, the clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Alexander. Ms. Ayotte. I have you. I have you. Sir. I have you. Mr. Scott. Sir. Gotcha. Mr. Isaacson. Gotcha. Berkeley. Mr. Sanders. Gotcha. Mr. Bennett. Rubio.
White House, aye, if you please. Thank
Ms. Baldwin. Mr. Barrasso. Mr. LeBan. Gotcha. Mr. Franken. Mr. Baucus. Mrs. Stamina. Mrs. Brown. Mr. Begich. I got you. He's right. You too. Thank you. Sure. Gotcha.
I know that. He's going to get us. We don't just. You got me, didn't you?
Yes, sir, I did. Mr. Bennett. I'm just going. Mr. Blumenthal. Mr. Blunt. Mr. Booker. Mr. Bozeman.
Yeah, you know how old these are?
Gotcha. Thank you.
You can tell that they're
Mr. Brown, Mr. Burr, Ms. Cantwell, Mr. Cardin, Mr. Carper, Mr. Casey, Mr. Chambliss, Mr. Coates, Mr. Coburn, Mr. Cochran, Ms. Collins, Mr. Coons,
No.
Mr. Corker, Mr. Cornyn, Mr. Crapo, Mr. Cruz, Mr. Donnelly, Mr. Durbin, Mr. Enzi, Mrs. Feinstein, Mrs. Fisher, Mr. Flake, Mr. Franken, Mrs. Gillibrand, Mr. Graham, Mr. Grassley, Mrs. Hagan, Mr. Harkin. Mr. Hatch. Mr. Heinrich. Ms. Heitkamp. I did get you, yeah.
Grassley, no.
Mr. Heller. Ms. Clocher. Ms. Hirono. Schumer. Mr. Hoven, Mr. Inhofe, Mr. Isaacson, Mr. Johans, Mr. Johnson of Wisconsin, Mr. Johnson of South Dakota, Mr. Kane, Mr. King, Mr. Kirk, Ms. Klobuchar, Ms. Landrieu, Mr. Leahy, Mr. Lee, Mr. Levin, Mr. Manchin, Mr. Markey, Mr. McCain, Mrs. McCaskill, Mr. McConnell, Mr. Menendez, Mr. Merkley, Ms. Mikulski, Mr. Moran, Ms. Murkowski, Mr. Murphy, Mrs. Murray, Mr. Nelson, Mr. Paul. I did. Mr. Portman, Mr. Pryor, Mr. Reed of Rhode Island, Mr. Reed of Nevada, Mr. Risch, Mr. Roberts, Mr. Rockefeller, Mr. Rubio, Mr. Sanders, Mr. Schatz, Mr. Schumer, Mr. Scott, Mr. Sessions, Mrs. Shaheen, Mr. Shelby, Ms. Stabenow, Mr. Tester, Mr. Thune, Mr. Toomey, Mr. Udall of Colorado, Mr. Udall of New Mexico, Mr. Vitter, Mr. Warner, Ms. Warren, Mr. Whitehouse, Mr. Wicker, Mr. Wyden. Senators voting in the affirmative. Baldwin, Bennett, Blumenthal, Booker, Brown, Cantwell, Cardin, Carper, Collins, Donnelly, Durbin, Feinstein, Franken, Gillibrand, Hagan, Harkin, Heinrich, Heitkamp, Hirono, Kane, King, Klobuchar, Landrieu, Leahy, Levin, Manchin, McCaskill, Menendez, Merkley, Mikulski, Murphy, Murray, Nelson, Pryor, Rockefeller, Sanders, Schatz, Schumer, Shaheen, Stabenow, Tester, Udall of Colorado, Udall of New Mexico, Warren, Whitehouse, and Wyden. Mr. Coons. Mr. Coons. Aye. Senators voting in the negative. Alexander, Ayotte, Barrasso, Blunt, Bozeman, Burr, Chambliss, Coates, Cochran, Corker, Cornyn, Crapo, Cruz, Enzi, Fisher, Flake, Graham, Grassley, Heller, Hoven, Isaacson, Johans, Johnson of Wisconsin. Kirk, Lee, McConnell, Risch, Roberts, Rubio, Scott, Shelby, Thune, Toomey, Vitter, and Wicker. Mr. Warner. Mr. Warner, aye. Mr. Baucus? Aye. Mr. Begich? Mr. Begich, aye.
Anyway.
Mr. Markey? Mr. Markey, aye. Mr. Reed? Mr. Reed of Nevada, aye. Mr. Reed? Mr. Reed of Rhode Island, aye. Mr. Portman? Mr. Portman, no. Mr. McCain? Mr. McCain? No. Ms. Murkowski. Ms. Murkowski, aye. Mr. Sessions. Mr. Sessions, no.
Have all members been recorded? Are there any members wishing to change their votes? If not, then the yeas are 55, the nays are 38. One senator responded present. Upon reconsideration, the motion to invoke cloture is agreed to.
Mr. President.
The clerk will report the nomination.
Nomination, the judiciary, Robert Leon Wilkins of the District of Columbia to be United States Circuit Judge for the District of Columbia Circuit.
Mr. President.
The senator from Michigan.
Mr. President, I would ask unanimous consent that I be recognized to proceed as though in morning business for 15 minutes, but prior to that, that I be able to yield to Senator Reid of Rhode Island for 5 minutes, and that not be counted against my time, and that I then be recognized after he's done.
Is there objection? Without objection, the senator from Michigan is recognized. The senator from Michigan is yielded to the gentleman, to the senator from Rhode Island.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to thank the senator from Michigan and my chairman of the Armed Services Committee. And I simply want to make a few comments about this afternoon's proceedings with respect to unemployment insurance. The reason we were here, and we can't lose sight of it, is that 1.3 million Americans, as of December 28th, lost their extended unemployment benefits. They are without the support, modest support, roughly $300 to $350 a week. Every week, 70,000 more Americans lose this support. We're going to see this number grow and grow and grow and grow while we talk and talk and talk and talk. Along with Senator Heller, we proposed a very straightforward mechanism. 90 days of the extension and picking retroactively up those who had lost it, unpaid for, so that we could work on some of the difficult issues that my colleagues have all explored this afternoon. And in listening to my colleagues, we made the determination that there was a sincere concern and desire on the part of my Republican colleagues particularly that any extension of benefits be paid for. Now, most frequently we don't pay for these benefits. We have on occasion, but most times we consider it emergency spending. We go ahead and authorize the payments and we don't offset them. But the concern was raised repeatedly and very strenuously that these benefits should be paid for. And also there are several proposals to do that. And so working closely with my colleagues, we considered that the best approach for it was not simply to bring up the Reed-Heller Amendment in 90 days, but to respond as best we could to these concerns. And so the provision we brought up today is fully offset, but it goes beyond 90 days because the simple logic was going through the travail of finding pay-fors is not something you want to do every 90 days. It's something that you should do seriously, but for as long as possible. And so our provision would be able to carry these benefits through to the middle of November. And it required finding offsets. The other thing we heard from our Republican colleagues is that you shouldn't use any revenue, no tax provisions. Now, in the Democratic caucus, we've seen this bill come up so many times under Republican presidents and Democratic presidents, completely unpaid for. But also, in terms of seriously and thoughtfully balancing the way we pay for provisions here, we have many times suggested, which I think is common sense, well, let's have a mix of revenue and other provisions, spending provisions. Let's do that. 50-50 or some combination, some fair combination. And in fact, the American people, I think, would see that as the most sensible approach to doing the work of government. But once again, we yielded to the perceptions and the demands, in some respects, that there be no tax provisions in this bill. As a result, we had to look for a series of pay-fors that didn't involve revenues. That was a deliberate attempt to reach across and to say, we hear you. You want it fully paid for? You want no spending? You want provisions that will not involve revenue? And so we proposed a major provision, an extension of the mandatory sequestration that was included in the budget agreement that got overwhelming support here in the Senate for an additional year, which gained us roughly, and these are rough figures, about $17 billion. And then we took one of the provisions that was offered by my colleague, Senator Portman, who's been working very assiduously and very thoughtfully on these issues, with respect to the double collection of both SSDI benefits and unemployment compensation benefits. We tried to focus it and make it narrow. It resulted in $1 billion, giving us sufficient funds to carry this program through, if we voted today, starting as soon as the House passed it, all the way to the middle of November. And that is where we are today. Now, we still are open to alternatives to try to deal with this issue. I know many of my colleagues on the Democratic side have a long list of revenue provisions. In fact, the Chairman Levin, has, through his work, have a list of what many would call, many Americans, egregious loopholes that corporations enjoy. But, you know, certainly there are other ways to pay for this. But we're still trying to work through this. We are still trying to find a bipartisan approach to deal with the issue of the moment, the crisis of the moment. And that is 1.4 million today, and growing, Americans who worked hard, through no fault of their own, lost their job, who are struggling to get by with a modest $300 or $350 a week. Now, one final point. This is a crisis of the moment. I know some of my colleagues are talking about some issues, for example, the issue of military pensions, that doesn't become effective, as I understand it, until 2015. And there are other ways to deal with this. But that is a fair position to advance at any time. And I have great sympathy for that position. But I would hate to see other issues, systematic reform of our training programs, comprehensive, which takes time, effort, and focused attention by committees typically. I would hate to see those issues essentially prevent response to the immediate crisis of people who are without jobs, who are looking desperately, and now don't have very modest support to pay for their rent, pay for their heat, provide some support for their families. We're still engaged. We will have a vote Monday. I hope we can succeed on that procedural vote, but regardless, we're going to come back and back and back because this number of Americans, growing each week by 70,000 approximately, needs our response, not just our comments here on the floor of the Senate. And with that, Mr. Chairman, let me thank the chairman and yield back.
The Senator from Michigan.
The current situation in Iraq is deeply disturbing. The violence there is a human tragedy, and the resurgence of al-Qaeda-affiliated forces in Fallujah and elsewhere represents a threat not just to the people of Iraq, but to our own security and to that of our friends and allies in the region. So I very much share in concerns that many of us have expressed about recent developments in Iraq. The United States has announced that it will expedite military assistance, including delivery of unmanned aerial vehicles and Hellfire missiles, and that is appropriate. The administration has stepped up intelligence sharing to help Iraq's security forces in their fight. That is appropriate. The administration is holding ongoing conversations with Iraq about other ways in which the United States might assist, and that is appropriate. One form of that assistance that one might take is the sale of weapons such as attack helicopters to Iraq. The issue here is not whether such aircraft would help Iraq fight violent extremists. It would. The question is whether the Maliki government would use those aircraft, for instance, only against violent extremists, and whether we receive credible assurances that such weapons will be used to target Iraq's real enemies and not to further sectarian political objectives. With credible assurances, it would be appropriate to provide Iraq such assistance. But what it is wrong to do is to blame the Obama administration for the political failures of Iraqi leaders. Blaming the administration for failures and decisions by the Iraqi government ignores not only history, it also leads to policy approaches that would not be in our interest or in the interest of the Iraqi people. For example, here is what Senator McCain and Senator Graham said recently, quote, "When President Obama withdrew all U.S. forces from Iraq in 2011, over the objections of our military leaders and commanders on the ground, many of us predicted that the vacuum would be filled by America's enemies and would emerge as a threat to U.S. national security interests, and sadly, they said, that reality is now clearer than ever." Close quote. Now, that argument ignores some important history. First, it ignores the fact that the 2011 withdrawal date for U.S. forces in Iraq was not set by President Obama, but by President Bush. In December of 2008, just before he left office, President Bush signed an agreement with the Iraqi government that called for the withdrawal of U.S. troops from Iraqi cities in 2009 and the complete withdrawal of U.S. forces by the end of 2011. President Bush himself, standing next to Prime Minister Maliki in Baghdad as they announced their agreement, said, quote, "The agreement lays out a framework for the withdrawal of American forces in Iraq," close quote. So the 2011 withdrawal date was set by President Bush, not by President Obama. As to whether our military commanders objected to our withdrawal from Iraq, here's what happened. While there was no mention from President Bush or Prime Minister Maliki when they announced their agreement of a U.S. troop presence after 2011, Secretary Gates and others discussed the possibility of some forces remaining in Iraq after 2011. And then, during 2011, the Obama administration entered into negotiations with the Iraqi government with the goal of keeping some U.S. troops in limited roles in Iraq to assist Iraqi security forces after the 2011 withdrawal date set by President Bush. I and many other members of Congress supported the idea of continuing a smaller, specialized U.S. military assistance force. While there was disagreement in the administration over the size of a residual force, what decided the issue wasn't how many troops would remain. Rather, it was the Iraqi government's refusal to agree to legal protections for U.S. troops, whatever their number. And in the absence of such protections, it was the opinion of our military leaders that no U.S. forces should remain in Iraq regardless of whether the number was 3,500 or 20,000. At a November 2011 Armed Services Committee hearing, I asked General Dempsey, then chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, about the importance of legal protections for our troops as part of any agreement to keep troops in Iraq after 2011. And this is what the questions and answers were. Senator Levin, are you willing to have those forces remain without an agreement relative to immunity for those troops? General Dempsey, no, sir, I'm not. It was the recommendation, advice, and strong belief of the Joint Chiefs that we should not leave servicemen and women there without protections. Senator Levin, and why is that? General Dempsey, because of the many institutions in Iraq that are still evolving and immature. The Iraqi judicial system is certainly among those, he said, and we did not believe that it was appropriate or prudent to leave servicemen and women without judicial protections in a country that still had the challenges we know it has and a very immature judicial system, close quote. Later in that same hearing, I asked General Dempsey if our commanders on the ground in Iraq shared that opinion, and he responded, quote, "It was the topic of many secure video teleconferences and engagements person to person. I can state that they also believed we needed the protections, both General Austin and General Mattis, in order to leave our troops there," close quote. And before our committee, in February of 2013, General Austin, our commander on the ground in Iraq during the 2011 negotiations, testified that there were extensive discussions with Iraq about a continuing U.S. troop presence. And he testified, quote, "We worked with the Iraqi leadership all the way up to the point in time when they decided they weren't going to be able to give us the protections that we needed to keep our troops there," close quote. And as Secretary Panetta put it before our committee, the key moment in the negotiations was, quote, "Once the Iraqis made the decision that they were not going to provide any immunities for any level of force that we would have there," close quote. So, Mr. President, our military leaders were very much unwilling to leave U.S. forces on the ground in Iraq if they could be subjected to the vicissitudes of the Iraqi judicial system. And it is therefore wrong to say that the withdrawal took place, quote, "over the objections of our military leaders," close quote. It was Iraq's refusal to grant important legal protections to our troops that decided the matter. Now, this criticism of the administration's Iraq policy also understates the importance of factors that have come to the forefront since the 2011 withdrawal. Foremost among these has been an Iraqi government that has repeatedly pursued a sectarian agenda, disenfranchised Sunni Iraqis, failed to address Kurdish concerns over the status of Kirkuk and the hydrocarbons law, and alienated moderate Shia Iraqis who seek a more democratic and inclusive government. Prime Minister Maliki's governance shortfalls have stoked the sectarian tensions on which al-Qaeda and other extremist groups capitalize. Many members of Congress have made clear that it is extremely difficult to support more robust assistance to the Iraqi government unless the Iraqi leadership places the good of their country ahead of sectarian politics, and unless it produces a practical strategy for governing Iraq on a more inclusive and less sectarian basis. For example, last October, I joined 5 other colleagues, Senators McCain, Menendez, Corker, Inhofe, and Graham, In writing to President Obama, expressing our concern about deteriorating conditions in Iraq, and I ask unanimous consent that our October 29, 2013 letter to the President be placed in the record.
Without objection.
In our letter, written as Prime Minister Maliki was visiting Washington, we supported an increase in support for Iraq's counterterrorism efforts. But we made clear that the Iraqi government must provide a practical plan for using such aid and provide assurances relative to who advanced weapons would be used against. We wrote the President Obama as follows, quote, "It is in our national security interest to enhance the effectiveness of Iraq's security forces, especially through greater intelligence sharing. However, we must see more evidence from Prime Minister Maliki that U.S. security assistance and arms sales are part of a comprehensive Iraqi strategy that addresses the political sources of the current violence and seeks to bring lasting peace to the country." Close quote. Now, we further wrote the following. This leads us to the final and most important point that we urge you to stress with Prime Minister Maliki. If he devises and implements a real governance strategy for Iraq, the United States is ready to provide the appropriate support to help that strategy succeed. And if Prime Minister Maliki continues to marginalize the Kurds, alienate many Shia, treat large numbers of Sunnis as terrorists, no amount of security assistance will be able to bring stability and security to Iraq. It is a tragedy for the Iraqi people and a real security concern for the United States that Prime Minister Maliki has yet to produce a strategy for broadly based governance in Iraq. We should not forget the 2011 withdrawal date for American troops from Iraq was negotiated by President Bush. We should not forget that the decision to reject an ongoing U.S. troop presence after 2011 was Iraq's, because of Iraq's refusal to assure us that our troops would have protections from Iraqi courts and prosecution. We should not forget that our military leaders supported the decision not to leave our troops in Iraq without legal protections from Iraqi prosecution. And we should not forget that while an ongoing relationship is in our interests, no amount of military equipment from us will protect the Iraqi people if their government continues to place sectarian goals ahead of sound governance. So we should use opportunities to assist Iraq in its struggle against violent extremism and for stability and security, but Iraq's fate ultimately rests with its people and their leaders. I thank the Chair and I yield the floor.
Mr. President. Senator from Alabama.
Mr. President, I believe that we've had two Democratic speakers, and perhaps I'm due to speak next, and I think Senator Murkowski is next, and I'm not sure any other speakers are expected, but I would ask consent that when I conclude my remarks that Senator Murkowski of Alaska be recognized.
Without objection.
I've been honored to serve with Senator Levin on the Armed Services Committee, and he does an excellent job, and he's spent a lot of time and many hours working to try to help us be successful in Iraq and other areas of national defense. And I think General Dempsey and Austin were right to say we could not keep our troops there unless they had immunity from local prosecutions. But as I recall, the net result of the President's decision, or the net feeling about the President's decision to withdraw from continued negotiations on this contentious issue, the military felt that this was not wise. At least many of them did, and they believed that had we continued to pursue negotiations, we may have been able to reach the kind of agreement that would allow us to help the Iraqi government to be stable and successful. Pulling out as we did always seemed to me to be too rapid, too precipitous, and created dangers that could place at risk that which our soldiers fought and died for. And I do believe that is what happened. And it's a tragic thing. I was in Fallujah not long after that bitter battle. We lost hundreds wounded and almost 100 killed. And the Marines performed with such valor and courage. It was one of the great, courageous performances of the United States Marine Corps. And it's sad, sad to me to see that today Al-Qaeda is flying a flag in parts of that city. And it's a tragedy, and it did not maintain the faith that we ought to have maintained with those we in Congress directed to go out and fight this war and to be successful. And maybe yet something can be done successful to deal with this situation, which I feel deeply about. I was here, Mr. President, to share some thoughts about the remarks delivered today by President Obama on the growing problem of poverty and chronic unemployment that has occurred during the 6 years of his presidency, after he's declared that the recession is over and was over. Just this week, the Senate Majority Leader, Harry Reid, said that the rich keep getting richer and the poor keep getting poorer and the middle class is under siege, close quote. Well, wages are not doing well. Americans in large numbers are not doing well, and they are hurting. And Washington Democrats, led by the President, are now proposing increased unemployment insurance and new wage controls to mandate wages that have to be paid to treat the consequences of a failed economy, a stagnant, slow-growth economy that's not creating jobs. So these words and actions represent an admission, I think, to me, that the White House economic agenda has been a disaster for poor and middle-class people. It has not worked. I know he believes it would work. I know he's advocated these policies. I know he promised that they would work, but they're not working. Worse still, the President remains fully committed to the policy regime that he's been advocating and that is not working. These policies have failed not just for the last 5 years, they've failed for the last 50 years. They will never work. So the President and Leader Reid are correct. A nervous American business community is hoarding profits because they don't know what the future is going to be like, and those struggling to get by are feeling results of corporate cost-cutting and the policies that we're seeing executed by the government are impacting this situation negatively. They just are. I know the people proposing these solutions think they're caring about people that are hurting today. But if you care about them, you'll use your head as well as our hearts, and we'll think through as to how to make growth occur in our economy, how to help jobs be created, how to have wages rise instead of stagnate or decline. $16 trillion has been spent fighting poverty since the war on poverty began, that 50-year event. Yet where do we stand today? 47 million Americans are on food stamps. 91.5 million are outside the labor force not working. And 46 million are living in poverty. In low-income communities, the pain is especially severe. For example, in the city of Baltimore, 1 in 3 residents receives food stamps. In Chicago, 51% of the city's children live in a single-parent family. In Detroit, almost 1 in 3 households had not had a single person working at any time throughout the year. Almost 1 in 3 households. The city's violent crime rate is among the worst in the country. More than half of all Detroit children live in poverty. So the welfare bureaucracy that the left is determined to defend and expand is failing our fellow Americans. It is just not working. We can do better. We've got to do better. No longer can we define compassion by how much money we spend on poverty, but how many people we lift out of poverty. That's the goal we must have. The amount of money state and federal governments spend on the welfare bureaucracy each year amounts to more than $1 trillion. That is a huge sum. It's twice the Defense Department budget. If all these funds were converted to cash and mailed to every household in poverty, it would equate to $60,000 per household. But we've got huge bureaucracies, huge multiple conflicting programs, and programs that aren't working and aren't helping the people that we're supposed to help. They just are not. Yet, as the President now admits, chronic poverty and a widening income gap is the new normal. Isn't it time that we broke from decades of policy that are not proven not to work? Imagine how much better it would be if we combined dozens of overlapping welfare programs into a single credit with better oversight standards focused on the goal of helping people become financially self-sufficient. We need fresh approaches. We have to have fresh approaches. We can do this. We're going to have to do this. I believe it will happen. The sooner it happens, the better off this country will be, and the better off poor people will be. But all we get from the White House are the stale policies of yesterday. That's all. What is the agenda the President persists in pushing? Consider the cornerstones of the President's economic agenda, the things he's been pushing in this Senate and this Congress and advocating unilaterally through powers of the executive president, some beyond all law, it seems to me. These are the things he has consistently advocated for. He wants a government health care takeover, and that is proven to be a job killer. It's killing jobs, and two-thirds of the jobs this year that have been created were part-time. And in large part, that was a reaction to the Affordable Care Act. What else? He has a hostility, consistent hostility to the production of American energy, which makes the country more wealthy to produce our own energy rather than transferring our wealth abroad to buy energy from abroad, and it creates jobs in America, high-paying jobs. We have repeated proposals for more and more taxes, more and more regulations that make it more difficult for United States workers to compete in the global marketplace. It makes it harder for their companies to be able to export and therefore create more American jobs. We have a lawless immigration policy that undermines American workers and their wages. It just does. They can say whatever they want to say. But the bill that passed the Senate, the comprehensive immigration bill, would have doubled the number of guest workers. And so some say, well, Jeff, they're just going to be agriculture workers. That's not so. Only a smaller number are going to be agricultural workers. They're going to have hundreds of thousands, million-plus workers traveling around the country taking jobs all over America, twice as many lawfully as would be the case under current law. This is supposed to be immigration reform. This is supposed to help American workers find a job, have a pay raise. We have a weak trade policy. We've got to stand up for the American workers on the world stage and make sure that our trading partners are accepting our products like we accept their products. And if they don't, we've got to defend the interests of the American worker. That's the way to help them have more jobs and better pay. And we have a welfare bureaucracy that penalizes work. The President's proposing more massive spending and creating more debt. He's had the greatest debt increases in history in our country, and that is destroying and weakening growth in America. It places a cloud over the American economy, as experts have told us. So these policies have been the order of the day now for 5 years. That's what we've heard. We need to spend more, we need to invest more, we need to tax more. We've had more regulations than we've ever had in American history. We've had trillion-dollar deficits, the likes of which we've never seen before. And people wonder why the economy's not doing well. We blocked oil production in the Gulf for an inordinate period of time and only slowly allowing that to recur. We blocked the Canadian pipeline that would create thousands of American jobs. We block energy production on federal lands. We make it harder for energy production on private lands to occur. And we wonder why we can't create sufficient jobs and growth. We need lower cost energy, cheaper energy. That's good for the economy. The falling in natural gas prices has been a help because of new techniques in production of natural gas. So these statist, leftist policies have been tried in America before, and they've been tried throughout the world for decades, and they will never work. Taxing, regulating, more government, taking over the health care industry will not create prosperity and jobs in America. It just won't. If it were, we'd be doing so much better. Since the President has entered office, we've added an incredible $7 trillion to the debt of the United States. $7 trillion. And what do we have to show for that? Real wages are lower today than they were in 1999. Take-home pay has fallen for 5 consecutive years. Average household wealth is 60% lower today than it was in 2007. 1.3 million fewer people are working. 1.3 million fewer people are working today than in 2007. Have we had a recovery? That's 6 years ago. We got fewer people working today than we had 6 years ago, and every month we add 100 or so more thousand people, 150,000 people basically, to the employment rolls of America, or excuse me, to the age cohort of Americans at work during their working ages, because the population is increasing that much. So you've got to create real jobs to stay ahead of just the status quo. And this is 1.3 million fewer people working today, even though the population has grown 14.5 million. 1.3 million fewer people are working today than in 2007, even though the population has grown 14.5 million. That is not good. So the President is right to be worried about the health of the American middle class and lower income workers in America. It sure hadn't been going well, and I know he thought his statist ideas would work, and he pushed them steadfastly, and he had a Senate that rubber-stamped for 2 years virtually in the House. They rubber-stamped what he wanted, an $800 billion stimulus bill that was supposed to create jobs and prosperity in America. Every penny of that borrowed. So if we continue down the road, I fear that we're going to sentence an entire generation of young Americans to poverty, joblessness, and stagnant economic growth, economy. Majority Leader Reid said this week that, quote, "We should realize that today there is only one job available for 3 people seeking a job. Think about it," close quote. Well, I agree. We absolutely must think about that. We should think seriously about it. My first thought is, since 3 people are looking for every one job that's open, then why has the President embraced an immigration bill that would double the flow of guest workers into America, who take jobs that would be available for American workers? Why? That's what I think about. As David Cameron, the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, said recently, immigration cannot be a substitute for training our own workforce. Is there something wrong with him saying that? Isn't that an honest, correct statement, speaking for the interest of the average Briton? So we need to help struggling Americans get off welfare, off unemployment, into good-paying jobs. And we have a loose labor market. We don't have a tight labor market. Byron York, recently writing an excellent column, showed that the very same companies that signed letters to the President and the Congress demanding more guest workers are laying off American workers by the thousands. Big companies signing letters demanding more workers, and they're laying off thousands of workers. It's a fact. He listed them. 10, 15 companies. Some of them laid off thousands of people the very year they're writing this Congress demanding more foreign workers. And so now we have to extend unemployment because people can't find jobs. We have to pass a law to set the wage so the wage can be higher because it's not going up through the natural free market like it should if we had a more normal market for labor. So who do we work for? I know who I work for. It's the hard-working people of Alabama and the United States. Now, I don't work for the masters of the universe demanding more workers from Congress when millions of Americans are unemployed. America is not an oligarchy. House Republicans need to tell this president firmly, we work for the American people. We reject any immigration plan that puts special interests, corporate interests, before working Americans. They need to say we're going to defend the working people of this country. It's not being defended in the Senate by the Democratic majority, that's for sure, with regard to the immigration policy. So a small group of CEOs, they don't get to set immigration policy for the country, no matter how much money they have, how many ads they buy. We're not going to enrich the political class at the expense of the middle class. And we will reject the immigration bill that passed the Senate. That's one of the things we could do to help improve job prospects for Americans. That would work. It wouldn't cost us a dime. We wouldn't have to borrow money. It actually would get people off welfare, get people off food stamps, and put them back into the workforce and put us on a better path. So if we want to reverse middle-class decline, we need a new economic vision. Here are some concrete steps we can take to restore opportunity for American people without adding a penny to the national debt. We need policies that work to create prosperity without borrowing and creating more debt. We just have to do that. What are some of the things? Produce more American energy, turn the welfare office into a job training center. We can do this. We're going to have to do this. We're going to have to move people from dependence to independence. We need to streamline the tax code. Maybe not any, I'm not saying we can have big tax cuts, but we need to streamline the code and make it more growth-oriented to help us be more competitive worldwide. Eliminate every Washington regulation that's not needed. These are regulations that kill jobs and kill competitiveness. We need to enforce trade rules with our partners that defend the legitimate interest of U.S. workers. We need to enforce an immigration policy that serves the national interest, the people's interest, that protects jobs for Americans. We need to make the government leaner, our government leaner and more accountable, doing more for less, like good business and good corporations and good companies are doing all over America. We need to do that with our government. That will help the economy. Balance the federal budget, restore the confidence of the American people and the world financial community in the vitality and the future of America, and spare our children from a lifetime of debt. Well, these are all positive steps that are true to our constitutional heritage and our legacy of freedom and opportunity. Those are the things we should be doing and we can do. They're all steps that will create more jobs and more growth without borrowing money. And these are all steps that will lift millions out of poverty, help struggling Americans realize the dream of financial independence. And I don't know what the President's talking about, a few little promise zones, is that what he called them, around the country? And this is somehow going to deal with the unemployment problem in America. He announced this today. I haven't had a chance to study it yet, but I saw the map. These are just a few spots around the country. This is not going to have any kind of systemic impact on our declining growth and weak recovery that we're seeing today. A recovery that, if it doesn't exceed 2% GDP growth per year, will not create jobs. And I'm afraid we're not in a good position there. We're not seeing the growth that we have, and experts are predicting slow growth in the years to come. We have to get off the path we're on, get on a path to growth, job creation, prosperity, and make sure our American citizens are trained, skilled, and operating and moved into those jobs so they can be independent and take care of their families without being dependent on the government of the United States. I would thank the Chair and yield the floor.
Mr. President.
Senator from Alaska.
Mr. President, it's been a disappointing week here in the United States Senate. I started out the week feeling pretty good, pretty optimistic, had